past relationships, if there's been more, and if you're in a relationship, do I ever think about it? And I was just saying to Tony before we switched on the video, I do believe that it's different for men than women, which could perhaps be a really interesting thing for us to talk about tonight. But we also do find when we do coaching with couples is that we do find out often that people have thought about it. They sometimes talk to their friends about it, don't they? But actually the last person they talk to about it is their partner. And that's where one of the things we're going to be talking about tonight, I'm guessing, is about telling the truth.
Absolutely. So
biggie
people coming on live now, so look, please do say hi, say who you are, where you're from, you know, all of that sort of stuff. We'd love to, you know, have a bit of a chat with you where we can. Nicki will be handling the keyboard, so if you have got any questions at all about the shall I go, shall I stay subject that we're covering tonight, then please feel free to type away in the box below, whether you're on YouTube or whether you're on Facebook. All the questions will come straight into Nicki B. You can hear her tapping away on the keyboard there.
Yes, I'll try and keep it quiet.
Yeah, we can answer those questions. So where should we start? Shall I go or shall I stay? Well, look, I think a good thing is just to ask yourself, have I ever been in that position, either for myself, or have I been in the receiving end of somebody thinking that, but actually I definitely want to stay? So I think Nicki just made a great point, is that sometimes this can be very different for men and for women. But I think it's also can be very different just because where you are in your life right now. But look, if somebody's thinking about leaving a relationship, then obviously something isn't working. And of course, what we tend not is we tend not, as Nicki just said, to why is it we don't talk to the other person first? It's like very often girls will be talking to their girlfriends, you know, the sisterhood thing. Maybe they'll even be chatting to their parents or their siblings. Sometimes that's where we sometimes go for help. So if your relationship's struggling, you know, we tend to go to people that we know, chat about it to them, but we don't necessarily feel comfortable chatting about it with the person who we're actually in the relationship with. So Nicki B, talk to us about girls and what it is that makes them not immediately want to talk about it to their man.
Okay, so lots of different reasons, but the first reason is that, well, this may be the same for men and women. You will back me up on that, or tell me what was the truth about men. The most common thing for any woman in a relationship or any age is she's always got a plan B. Now, what's a plan B? No, actually, first time ever. No, seriously, I'm saying it here live on Facebook or YouTube or whatever damn platform we're on. This has been the first relationship I've ever been in that I haven't got a plan B. What's the plan B? It's like, how would you live your life as a woman if you weren't in this relationship? And here's where the problem sits. So women have got that going on only because maybe this is a bit like we've spoken about the last couple of weeks, when we've spoken about the difference nowadays about men and women in a relationship. It's much more similar. We've got similar lifestyles, men and women, rather than years ago when we didn't. And I think that the thing is, women feel less safe in a relationship. Now, what I'm not talking about here, which I know we've talked about in the past with level 3, level 2, level 1 relationships, is safe physically, although that can be a reason why somebody would be thinking about leaving. But again, you know, I worked at one point with Women's Aid in Birmingham, talking to women who had left relationships or had left relationships because there was violence, etc., them, or in some sort of hostel or something. And that's obviously in a very extreme example where somebody's going, should I stay or should I go? And actually, let me be really honest about it. the most unusual thing about something that if you're not facing violence or unsafe physically in a relationship, you go, why would a woman stay in a relationship where there's physical violence? And here's the scary thing is women often go back. They say on average 7 times. I find that just totally amazing. Please tell me if you've ever been in that situation, or you go, whoa, Nicki V, surely that's not true. Is that, a woman will go back because she thinks that there's some way that she can act differently so that actually he'll stop doing that. But let's get on to things perhaps a little bit less intense and go, a woman's in a relationship that's not meeting her needs. Again, we've spoken about that over the last few weeks. When she's kind of going, my plan B, which I've been thinking about quietly in the back of my mind since we got together, just in case he leaves me, or just in case he's not nice to me, or something like that. I've been thinking about, where would I live? How would I earn money? What would I do, basically? And so she starts to think about that, and that becomes very, very real because she's not having her needs met. Now, let's be totally honest here. If you are in or have been in a situation as a woman where you've gone, I'm not getting my needs met, and I'm thinking seriously about leaving this relationship because I've got my plan B, I know where I'm going to go, and now I'm thinking, actually, I think that feels and sounds to me better than staying in this relationship, then clearly a lot of women will say to each other, well, don't worry, you'll be okay, you can come to my place, or, and that they all go, well, it's all about being fearful of being on your own or fearful about leaving. And what we say to people is, look, what we say to women is this: if you're not getting your needs, bloody guarantee, sorry to expressive, guarantee that he's not having his needs met either. And so if you really want to solve this and not just go for the logical, shall I stay or shall I go, then you need to look at how you're not meeting his needs either.
Yeah,
there we go.
So from the man's viewpoint, what's going on there? Look, I think Nicki's made a great point there, but I do think we have to always remember that, the biggest challenge is going back to men that are what we would call unhealthy. Sometimes we describe it as macho behavior. In other words, they're just very aggressive. When they get into a bad state, they get aggressive, and you're on the receiving end of that. So that's something that is different to sort of a general situation where your needs aren't being met. And you want to find, look, most people on the planet today, what we seek, either unconsciously or consciously, is to experience love. And of course, most people love for themselves, rather than have the realization that actually the love you experience is inside of you. So if you can manage to switch on the love inside of you, you get a whole different experience in life. And if of course you can find somebody else that's doing that, there isn't a neediness for love, because both people are in a loving state, sharing that love. That's your ultimate intimate relationship, as we often call it. But what happens if you're not able to do that, or you've never even come across the concept of that? I mean, when I was in my first relationship, or my first marriage, I had no concept of that at all. And bless my first wife, I'm definitely doing my best to get her to love me, but I'm not understanding what the word love really means. I don't know where to find it inside of myself. I'm expecting her to give it to me and all of that sort of stuff. And of course, these are formulas that are rife in modern relationships, which basically mean that en masse, it is said that there's about 3,000-ish divorces a week in the UK, a week. And then on top of that, about double that in relationships that are not marital but are breaking down. So we're talking masses of relationships going wrong because we don't understand some of the fundamental things that make a relationship work. Now, when we're in this don't know and understand situation, what a lot of men are doing or thinking or experiencing is that love and sex have got some link between them. And I met this guy once who was a bit of a guru in terms of this area of life, male sexuality and how it works and why we, why men do what they do. And he made this statement, which was really pretty much blow you away. And the statement he made was that basically he literally said all. He didn't sort of say most or, a lot. He said all men are sex addicted. And so I believe that if that is in fact true, and I think it's definitely true for those that haven't realized or they don't know the concept or the how to find that loving place inside of themselves, what we do is, as men, is we seek sex because we think sex and love are intertwined. And I think we were saying, like last week or the week before, there was some study done with prostitutes, and the prostitutes, when questioned, said that what they believed men wanted wasn't just sex. They actually wanted the experience of love, but of course they're looking for it outside of themselves. So anyway, that was a very interesting survey, wasn't it? But I think what happens is that when the relationship's not working, as we always tend to notice when we're assisting people, because one of the questions we always ask is, on a scale of 0 to 10, what score would you give your relationship right now? 10 being it's unbelievable, it's the best it can be, and 0 being it's a nightmare right now. What number would you choose? But we always follow that up with a supplementary question, which is, and when you think of intimacy right now, what number would you give that? 10 would be absolutely amazing, and 0 is it's not even happening. What number would you give it? And we often find the intimacy score is actually lower than the relationship score. Now, but when the relationship starts to go wobbly and people's needs aren't being met, intimacy is almost always one of the first things that starts to, lower itself, should we call it? In other words, we're less intimate, we're intimate less often, more and more and more. The gap grows between your intimate encounters, should we call it? Yeah. And of course, what happens then is men tend to feel this feeling of love because they're thinking it's external and they're thinking it's linked to sex. When that starts to go down, what tends to happen is that they want to meet that sex need, and if their woman's not going to meet it, then they start meeting it with other women. Now, that can lead down all sorts of paths, and of course, the risk is, and this is why there's no actual figures for this, but there was some American lady who did some studies, and she suggested that in relationships, 80% of relationships, which is an unbelievably high number, 80% of relationships have infidelity in them. And that's either, sexual infidelity, or it could even be emotional or mental infidelity. But look, that means that the person's needs aren't being met. So, their actions are proving that this relationship's not working if they're starting to search elsewhere. So from men, I don't think men, they definitely look to solve their intimacy outside of the relationship, if indeed the relationship, as I say, is moving apart. They're moving apart from each other. Now, of course, if they meet a woman that somehow meets their need at a higher level, boom, in comes to play. Because men are quite logical, they tend to go, right, this woman is better than that woman, let me jump ship. And I'm not saying some men don't find that difficult, particularly if there are children involved. I remember working with someone way back last year where they stayed in their marriage, even though they'd met another woman that was a much better fit for them, but they stayed in their marriage because of the children. So this is a very common situation as well. So that leads you to have, a non-truthful, because most men are not going to say, look, I'm having a relationship with another woman. Are you okay with that? So that, like Nicki said at the beginning, we're never going to talk about it. It's all going to be, swept under the carpet and hope nobody notices. But I think Nicki's going to be the first one to say that when your man is being unfaithful, as a woman, you have their sixth sense starts to be in operation, and somehow something's not well and not right.
Yeah, a few things that people have been saying, and I think just following on from that about the physical, I think Tony will have been saying about men's needs, sexual needs, and that's why they get into a should I stay or go. Have you covered the sort of over sexual woman that actually the men get fed up of it being over sexual? Would you believe it?
Really
Did you?
that, no.
Or a woman who's really resistant, either resistant to intimacy because of some issues that she's had herself, or sometimes that actually she's resistant because she's using sex as some sort of like to withdraw.
Do you remember we used to do this exercise? It was great. I don't know. I think I thought it up just in the moment, to be honest. But I remember having this group of men sitting opposite a group of women, and we gave them some cards, and we had them close each other's eyes, didn't we? And then the men would hold up a card, and we get the women to open their eyes and read what was on the card, and then we did vice versa. But I remember one of the things which was very fascinating. You might remember it better than me because it's years ago we did it, but it was very, very fascinating at the time. But I remember women had 2 signs as far. Maybe they had 3 signs, but one was I'm open for sex, and the other one was closed for sex. Yeah.
So just on there, and then we'll talk about the other signs. So this is really, really interesting. Again, that sometimes men are in a should I stay or should I go, because they've actually got a woman who's trying to use sex to keep him there. I remember you talking about a previous relationship where you said you honestly felt like she was wanting to have sex with you to sort of like keep you,
definitely,
because her fear of you leaving was great. Or we've also heard women who are withholding sex because they think, well, you know, that will cause a man to, you know, try harder to get intimacy. And I think that the sad thing about that is that actually, instead of a woman saying, well, you know, what do I want from this relationship? What does he want of the relationship? And we'll go on to those signs in a minute, because those were the healthy signs that we talked about. But so often what a woman is doing is trying to logically work out how she can improve this relationship. So I've mentioned on the chat on Facebook the book Women Who Love Too Much. And often, you know, especially as we've been talking about like things like dysfunctional relationships with like violence or overtly demanding sexuality from either a man or a woman, by the way. And with particularly with women, what happens is they go like, what I'll do, and this is answering Martine Bailey. Remember Martine?
Of course. Hello,
she
Martine.
said, I've been back. I went forward and back loads and loads of times. And I remember talking to you, Martine, and saying, look, this is so common, because what it means is a woman is actually kind of going either one. This is so complex, but like, you know, please, hopefully you're getting what you need from this, is that like a woman will go back to a relationship that actually she's preferring to be out of. So she's got a plan B that she's comfortable with. She knows, she feels safe. She doesn't want to be in this relationship anymore. Her needs were not being met. He's maybe not behaving very nicely to her or something. She'll go back because part of her either just cannot be on her own, and some of the macho behavior that some men do is quite close to masculine behavior. It's kind of got that masculinity, but it just goes past the line, as it were. And women are quite attracted to that. And there's a lot of men who go, oh, it'll never happen again. And, you know, I've had some help or whatever that is. And she goes back. But some women will literally go back because she thinks that the man's going to fall apart without her. And she goes, oh, poor him, he can't live without me, kind of thing. So there's lots of reasons why people do that.
Yeah, some of the behaviour of men that do macho behaviour, aggressive behaviour, they can also switch very quickly to passive aggressive, which is the sort of pleading.
Yeah, give me another chance and all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But so what was really interesting was we were also talking about you know, the fact that it becomes a pattern in the woman. She starts to think that actually the way to have a relationship work is that she gives up her needs, or she overly delivers to try and keep the peace. Often if there's a man who's not in a good state, he will have, he'll be emotionally unstable, in which case she's going to go, well, like, I'll be the mother here. So she starts then trying to organize his life so he's not upset. And then guess what? He's even less attracted to her because she's being all mothering to him and trying to be nice to him, overly nice to him. And therefore, she'll keep going back and she'll keep looking after him like a child. And I had such an interesting experience of this. Just very briefly share with you about a relationship that I had, which I kept going back to the whole time. And he would like be going, I'm a changed person and I'll never do it again and all that. And I actually look back at that relationship and see myself as the mother in the relationship. I was like the adult and he was like the child. He'd behave badly, mommy would forgive him, or mommy would say, look, you need to get some help or whatever. And then eventually I got some sort of sense, I don't know, some coach somewhere must have said some good stuff with me, and basically said to you, why are you doing this? This is your bloody pattern. And that's when I read, Women Who Love Too Much. This is your pattern. You are creating a situation
I seem to remember you saying in the past it was his sister or something.
Well, yeah, I was just going to that bit.
Yeah.
This is such an incredibly powerful memory that I have that may help you, is that, I'd broken up with the relationship and he kept coming back, kept trying to see me. I was like trying to like keep the peace, and he would sort of say, look, if you don't come and talk to me, just talk to him, I'll phone up all night and, wake your child up and all that kind of stuff. And so I kept sort of like giving into it, trying to keep the peace, not going back with him at all. Anyway, in the end, the thing that he did, which was to try to get me back, was to tell me that he would kill himself. And one day I was literally having a conversation with him on the phone where he's going, I'm in the car now. There's a brick wall ahead of me. I'm going to drive at it. And something just changed inside of me. And I kind of went to myself, well, that's up to you then. I'm not your mother. I'm not your, you're not my responsibility. Whether I said all those words out loud, I don't know. But that was the realization I had. Put the phone down. And the phone went again. And I picked the phone up thinking it was him again. And it wasn't. It was his sister. Now, this woman, this sister, I can't remember her name now, but I'd never got on with her. There was something about her, and I would get on with most women, and like there was something about her that, I don't know, just felt like she was judging me, and I felt, anyway, we were disconnected. So she rang up and she said, do you know that this person, and he said the name then, do you know that he is saying he's going to kill himself? So I said, yes, I do. And I've told him, that he's not my responsibility. She went, it's your fault, And I kind of went, what? She went, yes, it's your fault and women like you. And I said, how do you work that out? And she said, if you had never put up with his behavior when you first got together, he would have had to work out for himself that he cannot be in a relationship if he behaves like that. But because you've allowed, you've kind of like tried to help take responsibility for him and paid for things when he was too emotional to get a job or whatever that was, right? Because you've done that, he's still in this needy, victim state. And I put the phone down, I sat there and I went, you know what, she's right. Because at the very, very beginning of the relationship, he behaved quite childlike, quite needy, needing to have me do like a lot for him. And I continued to do that for 5 years and like kept going back because he couldn't cope without me, kind of thing. And it was such a huge, huge lesson to me that actually I always had a plan B, but my plan B was the worst kind of plan B, which wasn't like, how will I deal with it, if I left, how will I be okay? My plan B was like, well, I'll be fine, but he won't be. So I was like, staying for him, right? And that's when I realized my pattern. So, maybe you want to think about men or women. What is my pattern? Look back at your previous relationship. Look at whether you were thinking, shall I stay or shall I go? Look at whether you were running a pattern to try and hold the other person in the relationship. What patterns were you running? Think about it. You may not want to share on here, but just, if you do, please do. But like, if you think about it, what patterns was I running? And so that's exactly what I did. I absolutely understood what patterns I was running. And I know you've got a similar story, Tone, about when you came out of that relationship and you just went, it's me. I keep doing the same pattern. And then what I did is I went, right, there's a couple of things which I just want to share while they're fresh in my mind. I made a couple of decisions. One was I was never going to be in a relationship again where I wasn't telling my truth. That I wasn't saying that I was unhappy, that I wasn't saying that I was wanting to leave, that I wasn't saying that the way he behaved was unacceptable to me, that I basically was lying, telling my girlfriends, God, I must have been such a pain in the arse, honestly, telling my girlfriends, you never guess what he's done now, and I'm like this martyr who keeps putting up with it. I thought I'm never going to not tell the truth in a relationship. And funny enough, I was talking to somebody on the phone this very afternoon, and they were telling me about what their partner wants, and they were trying to make it okay. You know, they were trying to fit with what their partner wanted. And I could hear this on the phone. And so I said, hold on a minute. What do you want? You know, what do you want? And have you shared that? Now, that's the most scary thing often to a woman, to say to a man, please tell me how you know, what life with you is going to look like. Or please tell me if you're already in the relationship. What do you want? How can I meet your needs? I mean, how can I support you? Or are you happy? Because the reason why men and women don't do that, they don't have honest conversations, is because they're frightened of the other person going, well, actually, you want that. I want this. And actually, that's how I want you. That's how you want your life to be. That's how you want how I want my life to be. But also, this is like when we first got together, we were like happy, but now we're not happy. I'm not asking you to change, but I recognize I'm running shitty patterns to stay in this relationship, or I'm staying in this relationship when I don't want it. Now, I know this sounds like the most frightening thing to do as a man or a woman, but it's literally the truth will set you free. We have sat with couples, have we not, Tone? You must be remembering stories like me, like examples like me, where we've sat with couples and we have helped them tell each other the truth. And their greatest fear is that the truth, and by the way, the truth is not when you do that, it really annoys me. It's like, here's what's going on inside of me. And then Tony shares, here's what's going on inside of him. The biggest fear is that's going to be the end of the relationship. Well, if it is, so be it. But the experience we've got is that's the thing that reconnects people.
Absolutely. And,
sorry,
you know,
we've definitely,
no, but it's good. It's good. You know, we've definitely been in situations with couples where, you know, we've gone even beyond the should I go or should I stay, and one has gone, but then we end up in a conversation because the other one has encouraged the other person to come in and have the conversation. In other words, could we give it one last go? Can you, really, what they're saying is, can you solve this relationship issue? But I would encourage you, if you are in a shall I go, shall I stay situation, I'd recommend you're not people that thing. So I remember going, for example, bless her, to my first mother-in-law asking for help. Well, of course, you know, is she, you know, I can see it now, but I couldn't see it at the time. But she's not trained to answer the questions I've got. She's just got an opinion based on her life experience, which was about absolutely no value to me in the relationship or to the relationship as a whole. So I think going to family, friends, work colleagues, going to people that do not know anything about or understand relationships, but they're going to give you an opinion, is probably one of the worst things you could do. In fact, in we wrote this report, this thing, we called it the horrifying report about intimate relationships. And I think that's our number one thing, is that we go to people and ask for help when they have no clue what they're doing either. Because look, what's the truth? I always say the truth is none of us were ever taught anything about any of this at school. It's not on the curriculum. So just like you don't know, no one around you knows. But there are a few professionals out there, of course, that have, you know, studied this subject and are able and capable of guiding you through. So getting some professional help. makes a lot of sense, rather than, you know, mamby-pambling around with your friends and family hoping that they're going to solve it. So I think that's a really, really big point, because they're definitely not going to help the situation. In fact, they're very likely, inadvertently, to make things worse.
So we've lots of people
Lots of
on Tony
typing
V
going
tonight.
on.
Hardly anybody on Nicki V for some reason, except for Billy.
Hey,
Fantastic.
Billy.
Let us know what you want to learn, Billy. Lots of people mentioning things. Martine saying some. Dawn talking about the 5 languages of love. One of those languages is touch, and she's talking about how it helped her and her husband after 30 years to communicate better. Martine was saying how she was definitely kept going back because this man was kind of quite masculine, but of course he went to macho. But she's used the word codependent, which we haven't talked about yet, which is a great way of looking at past relationships, to look and see as the observer. So, you know, it might be useful just to think about this for a minute. So you look back at your previous relationships, and it, you know, might be easy to close your eyes and just think, as I look at that relationship between him and me, or her and me, right? What am I noticing about myself? Because here's the thing, when we look at the memory, half the time, probably much more than half the time, we're just looking at, in our memory, the other person and seeing them do stuff we don't like, right? Whereas actually, if we look in that memory at ourselves, what are you noticing that you've never noticed before? Look at your energy, look at your physiology, your tone, you know, hear your tonality. And so often, you know, I've just to give you an example, like I've spoken to women who have gone, but you know, I asked really good questions, like, why is it you know, why are you going to somebody else, you know, for your sexual needs to be met? Or the man's going, I tried to reason with her and tell her that actually it didn't mean anything that I slept with that person the other week, or whatever. It's like, when you look at that memory and you realize that whatever, which is why it was interesting, Dawn was talking about the love languages, any time you look at it and you watch yourself in the memory and you see yourself, hear the tonality of the way you said it, because your logical mind will think, but I said that, you know, you think that would work, and it doesn't. But it's your physiology. So women often will either be, clearly there's women who would be very aggressive about something, but sometimes women go very passive aggressive. Sometimes women go very pleady and very needy. Sometimes they go very, like, you know, aggressive and, you know, send them to the spare bedroom or whatever it is. Men, on the other hand, will be very, like, left brain, very kind of logical, and they'll be saying, look, you know, I don't understand, because I said to her, you know, I won't see that person again, or, you know, it didn't mean anything, or look, you know, most common, isn't it, Tone? I don't see what you're talking about. Relationship. All couples go off each other after. So men tend to go very logical, left brain. Women tend to go very emotional, right brain. That combination. So when you look back, see if you can be the observer of yourself. And it may be good if you could put something in the stream here. It may be good to think about. I think we've gone unstuck. Oh no. It may be good to pop here, if you will. What are you noticing about yourself, and why you got into that situation of should I stay or should I go? But even more importantly, why did you want to stay or go? You know, what were you doing that actually was not meeting that other person's needs at all?
Yeah, I actually was just going to comment on what Dawn said about the 5 love languages. It's not, you know, it's not a book we recommend, funny enough, that much. But I think what's great about it is if your relationship is in that sort of tetchy place where there's a gap growing between you, you know, if you're both going to take some action, and certainly going to take the same action. So look, if you both read the same book and have realizations about, you know, the way you're running your relationship together, then there's only really good that can ultimately come out of that. Because, you know, if Dawn, you worked out that, you know, your love needs are met in a certain way, and your husbands were met in a different way, you're then able to meet each other's needs, which is what we're always going on about. You know, if your needs aren't being met, then that is where you start to drift a bit and get into the, look, this doesn't meet my needs. We may not be saying that consciously, but unconsciously, we could definitely be saying this relationship doesn't really, it's not meeting my needs, but we're actually moving towards other people. You know, we start flirting and things like that, where we perhaps otherwise wouldn't. And I think just discovering the other person's needs, and if the love languages did it for you, then I think it's absolutely fab. Because then if you can meet the other person's needs and they can meet your needs, then that gap that's been created that gives you or can give you that, you know, moment where you start to doubt and think, you know, shall I go? Or I think I wrote it in the prelim on Facebook, you know, is the grass greener on the other side? But it is still interesting to think that most people will start to think the grass is greener on the other side, but they're still fearful of taking that step. Well, they're not so much fearful of taking the step. Sometimes people are more fearful of talking to their partner than they are of taking the step, which is quite crazy when you think about it. You know, because I think that, you know, we are fearful of the outcome. We're fearful of what we think might happen. We make pictures, images of what it could be like if we were to leave. And that can be so frightening that we end up not talking about it, but we still inside have got the whole, well, in our head and emotionally probably got, shall I go or shall I stay? And if you're a guy, you're almost definitely, if your sexual needs aren't going to be met, you're going to be observing, seeing other women. And if there are feminine women out there that even as they walk by you, then you can easily be attracted to that. So yeah, shall I go, shall I stay, can take on many forms. And I think as couples go, I think, look, my number one thing not to do is to ask friends and family. But if you're open enough together to talk about it without any blame, you don't want to get in the blame game, because the blame game is such low energy. All that will happen is that the other person will immediately start to defend themselves. They'll start to justify their behavior, and then technically what they do is start inadvertently sometimes blaming you, and then you do defend and justify. So the blame games is what I always call it, a lose-lose. A win-win is to be open and honest about what's happening for you, so that they can be open and honest about what's happening for them. And then if you want this to be fixed, then ask for some help, professional help, whatever that might look like. And, or, you know, I think what Dawn did was great, which is if you both read something, then actually, if you read it together, then you can learn about each other. One of the things that we did actually, we studied relationships. We studied them with people who were sort of seen to be experts. And one of the things, we haven't done that for a long time, but this is how long ago it is. We bought a tape set, a tape set. What are tapes? You don't even have CDs or DVDs anymore, do we? But anyway, that's how long ago it was. We bought this tape set, and we tape one and the side two. So there was, and we were really intrigued by some of what was suggested there about intimate relationships, and a bit like maybe Dawn did with the book, where she's, and her husband have tried things on, found that brought them closer together. We tried some of these things on and learned a lot from that. So look, I think delving and diving into some reading together will potentially get you on back on the same page. And if not, then we're obviously always here to ask for help, because that's what we do. So any questions coming in, or any observations?
Some comments. Let me just go back here. So people are saying I needed you guys when I was 18. I said, so did I.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, but actually, we're pretty rare creatures, you do have to dig and delve to find people that really do know what they're talking about. Yeah? And
Michaeline is very nicely saying she thinks we're the best relationship coaches ever. Could we send her information about what we're offering?
We are relaunching.
I knew
Tony
you would be sharing, but I said, we'll send her what we are doing at the
Yeah,
moment.
so we're relaunching the whole Tony Nicki thing, which has been on the back burner for probably 10 years, maybe a little bit more, because we got drawn into so many people came to our relationship events. And the honest truth is that so many people said to us, especially as we did groups, we did groups of normally 10 to 15 people, generally speaking. Sometimes they were smaller, sometimes larger, but 10, 15 on average every month. Yeah. And so, our experience was huge because we did it for 5 years, every month. And then people used to come back for what we used to call advanced events. So where they learn dive deeper into the whole subject. I've lost my train now. Why
yes,
was I saying that? What happened was that people started to ask us, could you teach us how you do what you do? Because it's absolutely amazing. It was very gripping sometimes in the room when we might be working with one couple and then there's singles and other couples sitting there. It's very gripping stuff, and very fascinating and interesting. Energy would go all over the shop, but we'd guide the people to have whatever experience they were meant to have. But yeah, so what sort of happened is as people started to ask us, could you show us that? We started to train people to do what we did because we realized, obviously, that, there's only the two of us. We can only help seemingly so many people. And this was in the days where, the internet was a little bit younger. So it wasn't as easy. You could only upload, for example, a YouTube video for a 10-minute YouTube. You weren't allowed unless you were someone super special. You couldn't load anything up more than 10 minutes long. And our YouTube channel is still actually there. We don't post on it, but I think we've got like quite a few people have, whatever they call it, subscribed to it. But that channel has had literally tens of thousands of views. It's very amazing. People go quietly on and have a bit of a learning. So feel free to do that.
Yes, actually, because Michaeline, what a great name. Actually.
It is very nice.
And she was saying that, so many people keep doing the same thing over and over again, which is when she said, my husband and I did exactly what you said, hence we're still going.
Oh, bless
so
you.
we must be
really,
spoken to her years ago, I think.
Yes.
And she's saying, and then Martine saying, one of the hardest things I came across now being a relationship coach herself, which she is meeting a guy. She's like, I kind of feel like I can only date someone who's a coach or someone who's done work on themselves. And I just wanted to say, that's not necessarily the case. There's some, if you followed us on the 10-10 movement, Tony talks about consciousness, talks about being really aware of ourselves and how we interact with others. And I think there are people on the planet, there are a very small percentage, but how many are you looking for?
No, I can remember the numbers, Martina. It's so funny, really, because, one thing we often said to girls in the past is, look, how many men are you actually looking for? And of course, the standard answer is, well, I'm just looking for one. So I said, look, roughly speaking, on the planet right now, there are 4% of men that actually are unbelievable. They know all this stuff. They haven't necessarily studied it. There's just something about them where they're more, should I call it, sort of more expanded. They're more aware. They're more aware of themselves and how life can work in a different vein. And they're definitely more loving. They're definitely loving inside of them, and they definitely connect with people that are very, very loving. So look, 4% of the planet right now, I remember 150 million people.
Yes, you're looking for one.
Which is, you're only looking for one.
Yes.
But look, we have to look in the right place as well. I don't think Britain's got that many of that 250 million in it. But, there's a lot of reasons for that. But because
But also, one of the things that's really important is, because we're on should I stay or should I go, is that often we think that there is one option, is that, like, if I stay, it'll always be the same. No, actually, if you work on yourself, you can have an impact on that relationship brilliantly, right? But if I go, will I just meet somebody the same? Well, yes, you will. If you keep doing the same thing over and over again, putting out the same message, you're going to get the same kind of in-person back. So actually, if you want to, which is what happened for both of us, really, once we realized that we were the common denominator of the relationships that weren't working, we actually put time aside before we met. Both of us, we always say, like, Tony was in London, I was in Birmingham, and probably for about the year before we met, we were both working on ourselves individually, didn't know each other, so that when we met, it was such a no-brainer. We were like singing off the same hymn sheet. Yes, of course, we had, we were like in personal development and stuff, but it didn't necessarily mean that it had to be. We just need to, as Tony said, somebody that's aware of themselves, has this great self-awareness. Now, I've got loads and loads of people coming in like this, so I want to get back to it.
The Tony Nicki B thing, we're going to relaunch the whole thing on the July the 1st. That's our planned date. Keep your eyes open, peeled. Stay on our channels if you remain friends with us on YouTube.
Some blasts from the past, some of our philosophy, some of our products and things, but they're being revamped, rejuvenated, given you
now
life. Matthew says he's got a girl who wants a lot of interesting sex with him, and I've just said to him, hi Matthew, you just need to tell the truth of what you want. If you don't like that kind of thing, then don't do it. But it made me think, and I said, and make good decisions when you meet somebody, and it made me think that we talk about stay or should I go. Let's talk for a minute about when we get into, we're only going to get into a situation where we're going, should I stay or should I go, if we make a bad decision in the beginning. See, so when we go on those first kind of few dates, or when we meet somebody, so often we get into a sexual relationship too early. I mean, much more nowadays than perhaps when we were young, but still when we were young, same, bit of the 60s and the 70s, promiscuity, is that the word? Yeah. But actually to realize that we're making decisions from an emotional kind of attraction basis, instead of, is this a person I want to be in a long-term relationship? How do they live their life? What are their values? How do they live? What do they want? What do they want from life? And I think so often, Matthew, we do not look at that. Martine Bailey says, I've got your old DVD set you both made. It's amazing. 2004. So that is like 17 years ago.
Yeah, we did.
Claire said, do we meet in Glastonbury? Oh, I'm suddenly wondering. I'm the sound healer singer.
I absolutely remember.
Do you remember that?
I do,
Claire?
indeed.
And this was years ago.
Amazing.
And sorry, I've got things going on. Let me go back to here. Sophie, hairdresser Sophie.
Come on, Sophie.
How can I just say hairdresser?
The amazing hairdresser.
Extraordinaire.
Don't think she's ever done my hair. Obviously, we've worked on this amazing hair for
many times.
And years. Yes.
Behind the chair, she goes, I hear all of this all of the time.
Of course.
Can't see what they do.
But that's so interesting, isn't it? That is so interesting, because they
hairdresser
will confide in you because they trust you. But they won't have that conversation with their partner. They just won't. I find that incredible.
It is.
But it is one of the secrets to life, sharing truth. But not, of course, we have to just keep always reiterating. It's not the truth of what you think about them. It's your truth about you. When you can do that, we have to go to a place of trust, which is a pretty expanded place to go. I know when I've talked to people, even in a, shall I go, shall I stay situation, trust is one of those things. It's one of those words. It's almost like I call it a gateway, and most people's trust gate closes. And if trust was a bank account, certainly for men get into a situation where they're overdrawn on trust because they don't. Some women are, and they try and control their man to force him to be trustable. Now but men love freedom. So if you tie a man down and force him, I just remember the most famous public story was the Chelsea footballer at the time. He was on the TV the other night. Ashley Young.
Ashley Young. No,
Ashley Cole. Sorry, Ashley Young. It wasn't you at all. It was Ashley Cole.
It was not you who sent pictures of your lower region.
Yes. No, and he was with the girl on the X
Cheryl Cole.
Cheryl Cole, yeah. Now, of course, they're public, they've had a very public, breakup of their, or challenges with their relationship. And so what she did, which is quite funny, is she gave him an ultimatum.
It was worse than that. She made him sign a document.
Oh, yes, that's right.
Like he'd been off with somebody else, been doing some naughty stuff, sending photographs of his dick to some girl or something. Anyway, she found out, clearly unhappy. But because they hadn't had any relationship coaching, they were not, as Sophie was just saying, which is just to bring that in, Sophie was saying, in her experience, people just cannot see what they are doing. They can only see what the other person's doing. So Cheryl and Ashley Cole were a great example of this. She was kind of going, he's just been a bad person. And then when they tried to get some help, I don't know how bad the help must have been terrible, expensive, but terrible, was that like, that they agreed that he would sign a document to say, I'll never do this and I'll never do that and I'll never do that. So not like, nobody ever questioned her. Why would he look elsewhere? And we wrote a press release, didn't we, at the time, but nobody printed it. Just to basically go, nobody's looking at her behavior, they're just blaming him. And Sophie's saying she's never heard anybody go, like, I can see what I'm doing.
No, that's
blame the other person.
Thank you, Sophie, for sharing that, because it is so true. And we have to deal with that as coaches. You know, the first thing we're doing is doing what people don't want, really. It's not the way to sell relationship coaching. In fact, I was helping a relationship coach the other day, and she made a bit of a statement, and I'm going, whoa, that's not what people want. You know, you have to sell them what they want. And what they want is they want a result. They want to resolve the situation. But, you know, what they mostly don't want is they don't want to look at themselves. But look, it's the only way. It's the only way to get out of a shall I go, shall I stay situation, is to look at what's your part's going on here. Because what you're doing, you can do something about. What they're doing, you can't do something about unless you try and control them. But look, I've done so many talks over the years with my amazing wife, and one of my favourite questions to ask an audience is, put your hand up here if you like being controlled. So how many people do you reckon have ever put their hand up in answer to that question? Well, absolutely zilcho. No one has ever put their hand up. But you see, in intimate relationships, what we end up doing, if it's not working for us, is we ultimately attempt to control the other person. We're trying to stop them doing to us what we don't like. And they're normally doing the same. And that is why it's fundamental when you get into a shall I go, shall I stay situation, that you have to look at yourself. So, you know, for me, you know, talking to your friends or your hairdresser is never going to solve that. Bless Sophie, she's obviously heard it all.
She's probably asking them coaching questions by now.
By now. She's obviously done your hair enough. You must have given her a few tips on how to ask questions. But yeah, it's those questions that, you know, feel a bit uncomfortable, but once asked and once shared from a place of truth, I always say, look, it sounds very woo-woo, but expect magic and miracles to happen. Now, the worst magic and miracles that can happen is that you have a massive realization and learning for yourself, an aha moment, which means that, you know, if this relationship doesn't survive, you at least go into the next relationship having some knowledge, information, you could even call it wisdom, that will perhaps lead you not to have the same thing again. Because there's nothing worse than leaving a relationship that's not working and then just going into the next one, and you carry on doing what you've always done that led you to the leave in the first place, and then you're doing it again. So guess what? This is never going to be another relationship that's generally going to last for a lifetime unless you operate somehow differently.
Yeah, and the only other thing we're talking about here, which is interesting, is that like the decision you make when you first meet somebody, either driven by alcohol or some other thing that anesthetizes you to logic, and where you look at someone. But the thing is, this is so, again, a pattern. So you won't want to look back and go, what's my pattern when I get into a new relationship? I hear lots of women especially say, well, you know, my little voice told me that this was not the right person for me, but I thought, well, I'll find a way to make it work, because I want to be in a relationship, because women generally want to be in a relationship. Men generally want to be in a relationship, but if they're healthy, to share love and to be connected, if they're unhealthy, to get sex. But, you know, as men and women, we are attracted to being in a relationship, but so often we go into a relationship for all the wrong reasons, and therefore no wonder we finish up in a should I stay or should I go situation. I mean, it's so common, and so this, in this day and age, what's happening so often is we think, well, isn't there some sort of funny thing that says men go, they meet a woman, they go, please God, she doesn't change. In other words, she's presented herself as this feminine, easy to be with, low maintenance person. And he's going, please God, that she doesn't change. And women go to a relationship going, how am I going to change him? And again,
well, one of the things we always used to say, this was funny. We always said if we were given £10 for every time we've heard this, we would be very well.
And it was, he's got
potential.
I knew you were thinking the same thing. He's got potential. Yeah, I went into this relationship with this guy because he's got potential. We go, oh no, don't do it, because you want to see how they. Now this goes for men and women, doesn't it? Look at how they lead their lives. So with a woman, look at this guy. Is he got a home? So can he afford to keep himself, let alone to be in a great healthy relationship? With men, look at this woman. Look at how she interacts with her family and her friends. You're likely to see, if the most common thing is men get into this relationship with this lovely girl and then find out that actually she's got a load of drama going on, which he gets sucked into. Well, if he's unintelligent, he'll get sucked into that relationship. And then he's sucked into that whole world of drama. That's quite common, isn't it? Mm. And the other way around is women will get sucked into a relationship where he then becomes needy and she becomes the mom, which is what I said before.
Yeah, and it was said of us once, and we never actually did say this, but I don't know who said that we did say it, but anyway, we didn't say it, but actually it's a good idea, is that, when you get into a relationship, first off, if you don't want to get into a, shall I go, shall I stay situation, and you want it to be a little bit more a relationship with solid foundations, is that you shouldn't be intimate too quickly. In other words, you get to know each other first, because once intimacy's taken place, there's a sort of, it's said that there's an energetic umbilical cord between anybody that you've ever been intimate with. So once that...
that's a frightening thought.
It's a lot of umbilical cords going floating around. But anyway, look, it would be better not to have that umbilical cord unless you really believe that this is going to be a loving long-term relationship, and you're then going to share some loving with this person. You're not just going to have sex, yeah. So this is quite interesting way to look at it.
Yeah, and just the last thing, because it's 2 minutes to go. God, that's flown tonight. Matthew's saying, I've realised I've become the rebound guy, which is the last few years, without realising, it's been devastating as I really connected with some of them. In other words, basically, think about this. If you look at past relationships, this is why if you're in a relationship, you're best to work at it rather than just leave and have the same experience again. But if you're not in a relationship, look back and go, when I left that relationship, how quickly did I try and get into another one because I hated being on my own? We absolutely...
Or did you do the other thing, which I'm guilty of, which is to line up the next one, before you finish the last one.
You've never said that quite so bluntly as you just said.
Yes.
Well, but then think about it. You were on your own for how long before we got together?
Eventually I got it that I needed to learn about me. I needed to learn about life. I needed to learn about relationships. I needed to learn a lot of things that I never learned when I was younger, so I made all these bad choices.
I think that's the absolutely best place to look. Where, if you are leaving a relationship or you're single, right, the best thing you can do is learn how to be single. Learn how to live without being dependent on being in a relationship. And if you aren't, when you're on your own, it's actually easier when you're on your own to work on yourself, to get yourself into a healthy, great space, have the life you want to have, and then attract somebody else who's doing good as well. The biggest thing that most people do is they don't like being on their own, so they go into another relationship before they've worked on themselves.
I think the other thing to also, just the last thing to throw in, is a lot of it's about peer group, because look, the number one reason people get into a relationship is said to be proximity. So basically, the people you spend time with are, you're likely to get into a relationship with somebody in that circle. You're not necessarily going to be a circle somewhere else. So make sure that you're in a peer group of high energy, loving people, and that you're doing that in the first place yourself, or at least working on yourself, and then at least see what happens, you're very much more likely to meet someone doing the same then. So yeah, that's it for tonight. We've been on for over an hour. That's
some great
incredible.
comments.
Thank you very much for
just
taking part.
Thank you.
Type into Nicki all your input from your personal situations, sharing stuff that you've learned, and Sophia for sharing what was said at the hairdresser's chair. Very amazing. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
so
thank you.
That's it. Until next week. And remember, put the 1st of July in your diary, because that's the day
we're going to
launch the Tony and Nicki, the intimate relationship stuff once again.
With a bang.
Indeed,
whatever that means.
So
not one of those kind of bangs.
No, well, over firework, you never know. Yeah,
we've had some interesting.
We've had some interesting
firework situations.
We'll tell you that story another day.
Tony's not the
health and safety.
He's
will
not
be
the
paramount,
king of health and safety.
So anyway, yeah, okay. So enjoy the rest of Easter. Have a wonderful time, and we'll see you next Saturday. Bye for now.